Welcome to Between Two Psychs, a podcast where two psychologists and board-approved supervisors deep dive into many of the questions and challenges that provisional psychologists and early career therapists face in everyday practice, during training, throughout the internship, and beyond as they progress into working more independently. Your hosts Isabel Tombleson and Claire Trevitt talk about a range of topics specifically relating to psychologists and therapists who are just starting out. Hello and welcome everybody to season 2 of the Between Two Psychs podcast. And so today we're going to talk about how we want our clients to feel in therapy. I'm one of these therapists that does this work. We've talked about this, Isabel and I. We do this work because we want to help people, and essentially we want them to feel better. But does that always mean that they are feeling good in and as they leave a session with us? And because it brings up all kinds of things around what actually we're doing in therapy, and some of this may actually be quite challenging, quite confronting, and that doesn't always feel good, even though it's in the service of doing good and getting better.
Yes. We thought this would be an interesting topic to talk about because it is true. We are asking our clients to step into a space where they might feel uncomfortable or feel vulnerable or even challenged. And yet, myself, I have this nature of wanting to be quite warm and fuzzy, to want my clients to feel better when they have a session with me. And so I sometimes find myself feeling a bit challenged about whether or not I'm challenging enough, or if I'm really working on the stuff that my clients should be working on. And I feel like it's also something that gets challenged in maybe the psychology community, that if we are tending to be a little bit warm and fuzzy and wanting our clients to feel good and feel nurtured and feel secure in their experience with us, then we're not really asking them, or we're not really doing the work that we should be doing with them. So it's just a theme that's been with me since I started my journey as a psychologist. I've certainly grown and developed and become quite good at sitting in confronting and challenging conversations with my clients. But I do think this potentially will resonate with a lot of developing therapists who are listening to our podcast.
Yes, I think what you're raising here, what we're discussing here, is the real balance between helping our clients feel, I guess, as safe as we can, we can help them feel in that space. That will usually depend on their background, their experiences, but clearly we're trying to create conditions that are conducive to safety and conducive to trust. And so initially I find myself working very hard in the early couple of sessions in early therapy so that I can create an environment that does feel good to be in, and creates a sense of hope for the future, because I think that foundation is just so important. But when do we start to begin to challenge a little bit in order to really help that person get better?
Yeah. So yes, exactly your words about the balancing safe, supportive, nurturing with identifying the goals that a client wants to work on, and I guess the learning that they need to go through in order to achieve whatever those goals might be. A great example pops into my mind straight away. If someone has a phobia of something, we're in traditional CBT, we're going to be asking that person to trust us to take them through a hierarchy of exposure items to overcome that phobia. That takes an immense amount of trust, at the same time as being okay with feeling scared and feeling vulnerable in that therapy space too. It's so delicate.
It is. And I think that really points to those early sessions and developing not only the relationship, but also some resources This is what I love about the EMDR and the different phases, because there's a real focus on resourcing, or any type of trauma model as well. When you look at the different phases, that stabilization phase, because we do need to be very careful that we're not challenging and creating discomfort too early on, because it needs to be tolerable and manageable.
So
Even though,
can I'm thinking now of some examples of when, we're early on in our career. For example, if you're someone who's maybe in one of the master's programs of study for psychology, we're attending lectures, we're gaining all this knowledge about interventions. Most of them are CBT based, or derived from CBT, and it's very task or problem oriented. You've got this problem, we need to go through steps A, B, and C to have you, feeling better and overcoming this. And sometimes it can be a thing that we fall into in those early stages, where we forget about the building up of the relationship and the safety and the alliance first, and we kind of just want to launch into let's just do the intervention. So I suppose, you've had lots of experience supervising people going through that, wouldn't you, Claire?
it is a real challenge, because it's sometimes not only that we're keen to get into those interventions, but also there's a time pressure. When you've
Oh
got
yeah.
3 or 4 sessions, it can be very, very challenging to do some of that work, and but also there's this pressure that, this is what you've got. These are the 4 sessions that you've got to address X, Y, Z. And so I think that there will be different levels of readiness from different individuals, and there will be some individuals that will probably be able to do some of that work and some of that intervention work after a session or 2. And there will be others that are much more complex. And I see this in supervision, and I'm sure you do too, where you do have a very time limited or session limited model. And the clients come with very complex presentations, that often longer term presentations as well, that really probably don't lend themselves to these shorter term interventions.
It's like the more complex presentations, maybe where there is some trauma experiences. And you did a great post on the Growing Therapist page about different attachment styles. I'm thinking about that post as we're talking about this. So if we are noticing like a disorganized attachment style, or avoidant attachment style, they would maybe be some of the signals. Some of those behaviors would be signals for us early on that, it's if we do try and push our client into moving into the intervention phase of treatment, we might lose them. And I was wondering, Claire, like, would you have any suggestions for our listeners for what they could do if they do notice some of those attachment styles that might indicate some complexity or some trauma history, and how we could help when we're in the early stages of our training and learning all of this? Do you have some suggestions for our listeners for what they can do to help navigate this space when they're balancing the pressure of needing to learn how to do interventions by doing them, being in time limited session situations, but then also having a complex client like that?
Yes, and I think that's such an important issue, because it is partly around that initial assessment of identifying which clients are likely to be able to do that type of work in a short-term setting and will be receptive to those interventions, versus those clients who may be ready.
So how do we identify, like, I'm asking you just because I would love to hear your perspective. I've got my ideas too. Like, how would you start by identifying whether or not they're appropriate to begin doing intervention within in a short time period?
Yes, in some ways that's very difficult for me to sort of pinpoint specifically, because part of that comes with a sense of getting to know an individual. But I think what comes up, I think for me, I'm now trying to break this down because it feels so intuitive for me.
I know, yeah.
Such a good question, because you're breaking it down. I think in that initial intake, getting a sense of what a client is actually wanting from treatment. Those clients that say, I want strategies, I'm recognizing that there's a level of insight in the as part of the mental state exam, which is usually part of most intake assessments. Now, I'm aware of these issues. I know that they're holding me back, and I'm looking for a way to be different. And so when clients present in that way, that's where I guess they're coming from that level of insight, but they're also coming from that level of receptivity as well.
Readiness as well. You used that
Yeah.
word readiness before. If we think about the stages of change, they're not even contemplative. They're in the preparation stage by coming and seeing us. They're like,
Yes.
I'm ready for this. Can you help me get to the next step, the next action stage?
Yes, exactly. And there's a level of trust and receptivity there that I think when we think about from an attachment perspective, 50% of people present with a secure attachment style. And when I think about somebody with a secure attachment style usually comes in ready to build a relationship. There's a sense of, you're a therapist and I'm coming to see you because I think you can help me. So there is a level of trust that's already there.
Yeah.
And so
it's like an assumed trust without even knowing you yet, sort of thing. Like, you're a therapist, therefore I can trust you, therefore you're going to help me, and I'm ready to be helped.
Yes, I think some people do come with that, and that makes our job much easier. These are the sessions that tend to flow, and we tend to get a very much of a sense of give and take. Whereas when you've got somebody with maybe a more of an avoidant attachment style, for example, it's going to take them a long time to build that trust, because it doesn't feel safe for them. And so therefore, getting a sense of that quite early on, and well, I'm not sure why I'm coming. These are the clients that would often, they don't quite know why they're coming.
Yep.
I just thought it might help. Someone said it might help.
Yeah.
And these types of clients are likely to require a lot more, I think, psychoeducation and introduction to what it is that we can do, but also are likely to require a lot more choice and agency in what we're asking. Whereas somebody who's coming in receptive and I'm ready will probably be very happy to look at whatever we've got to offer, and be very open to that. Whereas other clients might sort of be a little uncertain, a little bit unsure, and a little bit fearful about what that's going to mean.
Yeah, and there might be some underlying beliefs or assumptions about therapy that might contribute to that avoidant attachment style, or even a disorganized attachment style, where so underlying beliefs or biases, that therapy is a dangerous thing to engage in, or it could be risky for you, or even just maybe not being used to having safe, secure relationships with other adults, that and we're asking people to come in and sit with us, and we're going to be very warm and welcoming, and that might be an unsafe experience for them too. So I think what you said was really practical and really useful, is maybe focusing a lot more on providing choice, explaining what therapy is, what different types of approaches of therapy can look like, because we can adapt, like especially when we get experienced, we can sort of switch hats up a little bit, can't we, for our clients. And then psychoeducation about why it is they feel the way that they feel.
I think choice is so important, for our clients, and we sometimes forget what we know that they don't know.
Yeah.
And particularly when we've been doing it for some time, but also some of what we teach our clients can seem very straightforward. It kind of needs to be, because we're asking them to engage in something. Even if we look at breathing exercises or relaxation exercises, which are very straightforward, not hard to do, but getting into practice and the benefits that they can offer can be, very profound at times,
Mm.
and have enormous benefit. And so a lot of that's around the psychoeducation for clients in explaining why this repetition is
Yeah.
can be so important, why the practice can be so important.
And why this seemingly basic thing, uh, it actually makes me think about when I've been to physio, and this is a common thing that I've talked about with other people. You go and see a physio, you've got like a backache or a neck ache or something like that, and you go to a physio and they get you to do these exercises, and you're thinking, what good is that exercise going to do? It's like, this isn't fixing anything. And it's only through getting older that I've learned, oh no, so the physio exercise, it doesn't feel like it's doing much, but when you repeat it over and over, it's actually strengthening up muscles that I'm not aware are needing to be strengthened. So that's like an almost like an analogy we could
Mm.
use for our clients with breathing exercises or mindfulness or any of that stuff. Hey.
I think so. And actually, I've heard clients say to me before, this is like, it's like a muscle that
Mm.
needs to remember, because it is that repetition. And I think therapy, well, particularly I was trained in the sort of psychodynamic model. I always think about therapy as if we're kind of walking around a really big mountain, but the long way, and we're sort of going around in a circle. And at each point, we're almost looking out at the same thing, but we kind of do get slightly higher and higher as we go.
Mm.
And so, the landscape is quite similar, but the perspective just changes ever so slightly. And it's repetitive. It's
Mm.
the same thing over and over and over. And all of a sudden we think, oh, I get that now.
Yeah, yeah, love it, love it. That journey, that oh, actually that yeah, and that even makes me think about sometimes when we're at the end of, a treatment phase with someone, and um taking the time at the end of that final session to reflect back and remind the client about what it was like, what they were like when they first came back. And sometimes clients don't give themselves recognition or praise or realize just how much has changed. It might not feel like it because they've been on this incremental journey, slowly, slowly, step by step, even if it's just been 4 or 6 sessions. But really, the change is nice to sort of show them, especially if we've got some, outcome measures or something like that that we can compare to when they started.
That can be very helpful as well when clients do get that comparison.
Mm.
Um, sometimes it's enough for them to see that, but sometimes that score on the piece of paper, like the DAS
Mm.
score changing or the K10 score
Yeah.
changing, can be very helpful,
Mm.
and it can feel like some of those difficult moments become worth it.
Yeah. Yes. So having a weekly outcome measure is probably useful for some of our clients that we're socializing to this therapy experience. So yeah, so we got, I've taken us right now to the end of therapy, assuming everything's going well. But maybe to finish, just to sort of bring it back to those main points that we wanted to share with our listeners around well, what to do when we're noticing that we want our clients to feel good in session. Um, Being mindful of maybe some of our own psychodynamic experiences going on for us. I know that that's been helpful for me. So, noticing that I tend to have that need to want to have a nice warm environment when I'm working with my clients. So being aware of the varying types of approaches or underlying needs that all of us therapists have because we are human. But being aware of the complexities of our own clients, if we're noticing that they're saying to us that they're unsure about why they're in therapy, I think that was a really useful tip, Claire. If the language is sounding ambivalent or uncertain or unclear, then that could be a indication for us that it might be okay to allow our client to have some time to warm up to what this experience is like, and using our knowledge of complex trauma, using our knowledge of attachment theory to provide some education and normalize all of that. And as well, what you said about just like teaching our clients what therapy is, like what's involved, what to expect, and the options that they have. I thought that was all really useful.
And I think coming back to that sort of, do we want our clients to feel good versus, those moments where they may not. And I think ultimately we do this work because we want to help people. But sometimes I've been did some training recently, and we were talking about becoming attached to outcomes, which I thought was quite fascinating, because we were asked to think about some scenarios in practice in a group setting, and whether we were, as therapists, were more attached to the outcomes than our clients were.
Mm.
And I think what
Wow.
I think we sometimes forget is that what is the outcome for a particular client? Sometimes, it's hard. I mean, I think we all probably struggle with some presentations over others, depending on our own sort of histories and our own sort of personalities. So there are certain types of presentations that I find much easier, and certain presentations that I find much harder. And for others, it may be different. And I'm quite aware of that. And so sometimes I think that it's easy for us to get caught up in what we want for the client.
Yeah.
And in that moment, what the client wants is maybe just to be heard and to be recognized and to be validated. And if we become too attached to the outcomes and the interventions, we can miss that very important piece that some of our clients haven't necessarily had in many other relationships. The therapeutic relationship is a very different type of relationship, but I do believe it is a relationship and it is a connection.
Mm.
And sometimes what actually helps our clients feel better is not just the intervention component, but also that being heard and being listened to. And sometimes that in a session can feel as though it's giving the client what they need, and we become attached to, but I want to move them on from this place onto
No.
this place. But
Yeah.
actually what they're needing is just to be met where they're at.
Mm.
And
I love, love, love. Oh, it's so good to hear you say that. Because what it is you're giving permission to our listeners to know that it's okay to just be holding space for our clients, and that is the therapy. That could just be the therapy that they need. We're taught, intervention, CBT, EMDR, schema, everything, but sometimes just being there and listening. Is it?
yes, for some sessions, and I'm not saying that that should be all therapy is, because I think that on an ongoing basis maybe won't reach the level of
Mm.
change that even the individual themselves, is actually seeking.
Mm.
But I guess it's that tendency, and I think the system doesn't help with this. The system meaning Medicare with its 10 sessions and various other services that provide very limited number of sessions, it often doesn't allow for that.
Mm.
And where I see my supervisees supporting people with this level of complexity, where I think, look, the intervention probably is not going to be as effective as we want it to be because the client's not at that level of readiness. One of the things that I think can be helpful is to provide an experience of what therapy is like in preparation for something
Mm.
longer term, and spend a little bit of time with that client trying to identify where they can then access further sessions through some other type of service, whether it's victim services, if it's a trauma, whether or not NDIS funding may be applicable for their particular presentation and symptoms, and whether or not a community-based service might be, because
Mm.
private practice and limited number of sessions doesn't suit every client, and there are options out there. So sometimes I think it's about providing a really good experience in 3 or 4 sessions,
Mm.
and then give the client the sense of and hope of what a longer term relationship might look like. And
Yeah.
so we are providing a really strong level of support, but it doesn't necessarily look like
Mm.
intervention we had in
When
mind.
doesn't it might not look like we're doing as much as we would like to, or as much as we maybe should, according
Mm.
to people with other thoughts about how we could be doing things.
And it may involve a level of case management too, in terms
Mm,
of coordinating and supporting to get that person to what is actually needed for them, so
mm,
that then there is the time for that resource building and that readiness,
mm,
which
mm,
some short-term models don't allow for.
The provision of knowledge, and access to resources,
Mm,
what therapy is, how therapy works, how it should feel when it's going well, nurtured, safe, secure, not judged, and all of that. And I guess laying the foundation so that more work can be done either the following year when there's more Medicare funding. For me, in a community-based adult service, we are also encouraged to stick to a certain number of sessions. And so what I'll say with the client when I'm finishing up after around 6 or so sessions is let's just pause. Let's take some time for you now to take everything that you've learned with you, into your life. Um, let it sink in, process, everything you've taken on board, see what is different, see what is better, what's changed, and you can always come back again if you need to. We don't tend to sort of, say you have to come back next year, but we just like to encourage our clients to have a pause in between treatment episodes so that we can, give them space to absorb everything that they've learned. But
sorry, that option to come back. Yeah,
always the option to come back.
yeah, yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah.
That's really, I think that's very helpful for clients. The other thing is that in what you were saying when you were talking about, we've both been talking about providing education around what therapy is, etc. I think we forget that psychoeducation in itself is an intervention and how
Mm,
valuable that can
yeah.
be.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if we have clients who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, or maybe who haven't had as many education opportunities as some of our other clients. So just knowledge that we take for granted, like you said before. So that's absolutely therapeutic in just sharing and providing that knowledge, and then the skills can maybe come later. But
Mm.
I think to summarize, we've kind of, the question we sort of started with at the beginning is it okay that we want to make our clients feel good when they've had a session with us? And is it all right for us to want to strive for that? And I think we've answered it. Essentially, it's essential that we do help our clients to feel at least safe, and not judged in the therapy sessions, and that therapeutic relationship that we are creating with them is the foundation for us to be able to do all of this work that we've talked about today. So yeah, hopefully that's been helpful.
And there may be moments though in sessions where that are uncomfortable, but that is still in the service of getting better and feeling better. So it's not like 100% of our time is going to be spent in feel-good moments.
Mm,
Um, but ensuring that there is enough of that the work can feel fruitful and productive and
mm,
motivate the client to want to come back and continue to do the
mm,
work.
mm. Is it okay if I sort of create an analogy of like the ideal parent-child interaction? The child feels safe with a parent. They know that they're loved. They're not judged by the parent, ideally, with a good, healthy attachment. But at times the parent needs to be firm and set some boundaries and explain some consequences for some actions, or, yeah, I can't think of what other descriptions, but that could be an analogy for what we're describing, couldn't it?
I think it's a perfect analogy because, yes, it's not in the child's best interests for them to have everything that they want and feel good in every moment because life isn't like that. And so we are wanting to prepare children for the real world. And to some extent in therapy, we also want to prepare our clients to take what we give them in the session back out into the real world as well.
Mm.
And so I think that, I mean, schema therapy certainly uses the concept of limited reparenting.
Yeah.
And in psychodynamic therapy, we talk a lot about corrective experiences. So if a
Oh,
client hasn't had that, or a sort of, it is almost like a reparenting in a different sense, in that we are wanting to provide our clients with the experience that they didn't have that would have been as in the ideal parent response.
Mm, mm, mm. And
It's a
it,
lovely analogy.
and a part of the process that they're going through when they're in therapy with us is, maybe almost like a healing from having a corrective experience in that therapy relationship with us. Yeah.
Yeah, as in the therapeutic relationship, represents a healthy relationship.
Mm, absolutely. Okay. Well, I think we've, really nailed it for this episode. Thank you, Claire.
Thank
And
you.
we will see you all again at the next episode.
We will. Thank you for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps others find the show. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Between Two Psychs for more updates and resources. For more information and to explore everything we offer, head over to our website, betweentwopsychs.com.au. We appreciate your support and we'll see you next time.